4 million followers. A penthouse apartment with a view that made people stop scrolling. 3 luxury cars. A wardrobe worth more than most people's annual salary. Brand deals, press features, front row seats at fashion weeks in 3 different cities. Everyone wanted to be Blaine Quinn. There was just one problem. Blaine Quinn was absolutely, completely, spectacularly broke. Welcome to Corporate Chaos Scandals, the place for the most shocking and unbelievable workplace confession stories. From office drama to hidden secrets, nothing is off limits. Before we get into this, make sure you subscribe and like, because we bring you stories like this every week. His name is Blaine Quinn, 29 years old. Originally from a perfectly ordinary suburb of Manchester, a place where ambition was not discouraged exactly, but where the gap between where you were and where you wanted to be was wide enough that most people eventually decided the gap itself was the destination. Blaine did not decide that. Blaine looked at the gap and decided it was temporary. He had started posting at 22 in his first flat, with a phone camera and the kind of aesthetic instinct that either you have or you don't. His early content was raw, genuinely raw, not the performed rawness that became fashionable later. Actual footage of a young man from Manchester figuring out how to dress, how to live, how to build a life that looked the way he needed it to look. There was something real in it, something that people responded to, slowly at first and then, as the algorithm caught on to what he was making, with a speed that surprised even Blaine. By 25, he had 500,000 followers. By 27, 2 million. By 29, 4 million. He was a name, not a celebrity in the traditional sense. He would not be recognized in a supermarket in Birmingham. But in the specific, self-contained universe of lifestyle and luxury content, he was one of the most recognizable faces in the country. The brand deals followed the audience the way brand deals always do. A clothing label, a premium watch company, a supplement brand whose target demographic matched his audience with statistical precision, a luxury luggage partnership, a hotel series, an automotive brand that paid him for a single 3-part video series more than his father had earned in 2 years of driving for the same firm. By the time Blaine was 28, he was earning close to £1 million a year from content creation alone. By every conventional measure of success, Blaine Quinn had made it. Now, let us talk about what was actually happening. The penthouse was £10,000 a month in rent. This figure is important. £10,000 a month, £120,000 a year, for a flat that he did not own, that appeared in his content as the visual anchor of everything he presented himself to be, the lifestyle, the achievement, the proof that the gap was closable if you wanted it badly enough. The 3 cars, a Range Rover Sport, a Porsche 911, and a blacked-out Mercedes that appeared in roughly 40% of his posts, the one that commenters described as the most Blaine Quinn vehicle imaginable, were all on finance agreements, not bought outright, not even close to bought outright. Monthly payments on each one, staggered across 3 separate finance providers, that together amounted to another significant chunk of his monthly outgoing. The wardrobe was a combination of gifted pieces, purchases on credit cards, and items acquired through brand partnerships whose contractual terms required specific posting obligations that Blaine was, it must be said, not always fully reading before he agreed to them. The watch collection, which featured prominently in his content and which his audience discussed with something approaching reverence, was partly bought, partly leased, partly gifted, under arrangements whose terms he had not entirely clarified. The first-class flights, the five-star hotels in destinations that served as backdrops for travel content, the restaurant bills from places whose names carried social weight. All of it ran through a credit infrastructure that had been, from the beginning of his career's acceleration, stretched in ways he had not fully examined. Blaine Quinn was earning just under £1 million a year. He was spending £1.5 million. He had been doing this for 2 years. The gap between those two numbers was being filled by credit cards, all of which were either at their limits or approaching them. By payment deferments, by the particular financial sleight of hand that Americans call robbing Peter to pay Paul, using one source of credit to cover another source of credit, in a cycle that creates the illusion of management while the underlying debt quietly compounds. He had a financial manager in year 1 of his career. He had let that relationship lapse in year 2 because the conversations had become uncomfortable. His financial manager had started using words like unsustainable and restructure, and the word that Blaine found most intolerable, which was stop. As in, you need to stop spending at this rate. As in, the income does not support this level of outgoing. As in, if you continue on this trajectory, the consequences will be significant. Blaine had thanked her for her insights and ended the engagement. He could find another manager. He did not. Because finding another manager would require having the same conversation again, and Blaine was, at his core, a man who had discovered that discomfort was avoidable if you simply declined to engage with the people who caused it. This is not stupidity. This is a specific and very common failure of successful people who have never been taught, or have refused to learn, that money management is a discipline rather than a talent. Blaine had talent in abundance. Discipline in this particular area he had systematically avoided. The first concrete sign that the infrastructure was failing came on a Tuesday morning at a coffee shop in Shoreditch. Blaine was between a content shoot and a meeting with a brand representative. He was wearing a coat that had cost £1,200. He was carrying a bag that cost £800. He ordered a flat white and a pastry and handed over his card. It was declined. Not because the account was empty. Technically it was not, but because a direct debit for one of the car finance payments had processed the previous night and taken the balance below the minimum threshold required for the card to function at point of sale. He paid on a different card. He laughed it off with the barista in the easy way of someone who has been performing confidence for long enough that it functions even when confidence is the last thing they actually feel. He posted a story about the coffee shop on his way out, tagging the brand, already mentally filing the interaction under content potential. But something had shifted. Something small and cold and persistent had gotten through the noise of the performance. The kind of awareness that had been trying to get his attention for the better part of 2 years had, via the mechanism of a £4.50 flat white, finally managed it. He sat in the meeting with the brand representative an hour later and talked numbers and reach and engagement metrics. He smiled. He was articulate. He was exactly what they were paying him to be. And underneath all of it, the cold, small thing sat and waited. The intervention, when it came from his sister Darcy. Darcy Quinn was 32 years old, 3 years older than Blaine, an accountant in Leeds with 42,000 social media followers, which she considered entirely sufficient. She had a mortgage. She had a pension she contributed to monthly. She took 2 holidays a year to places she could afford. She had never, to Blaine's knowledge, leased a car she couldn't pay off in 18 months. She came to London for a weekend in February. They had dinner on the Friday. They walked on Saturday morning. And at some point on Saturday afternoon, sitting in the kitchen of the penthouse with its extraordinary view, Darcy said, Blaine. How are things actually going? Not the content, the actual numbers. He gave her the version he gave everyone. Great. Busy. Big things coming in Q2. Several exciting conversations happening. Darcy looked at him with the specific expression of an accountant who has heard cash flow optimism deployed as a deflection by enough clients to recognize it immediately. She said, "Let me see your accounts." He said, "Why?" She said, "Because you borrowed 50 quid from me to cover the cab here, and you have 3 cars outside, and something about that doesn't add up, and I'd like to know what it is." He said he'd pay her back. She said she knew. She also said she'd like to see the accounts. Please. She put the please on it in the way that only older sisters can put please on a request and have it function as something closer to a requirement. What followed was 2 hours at the kitchen table of the £10,000 a month penthouse, with every banking app open on his phone, every credit card statement on the screen, every finance agreement read through. Some of them, it turned out, by Darcy for the first time, and by Blaine also for the first time since he'd signed them. Darcy didn't raise her voice. She was an accountant. Accountants deal in facts. The facts here were clear enough that raising your voice about them would have been redundant. She said, "Blaine, you are 1 month away from not being able to make rent." He said, "There's a deal coming." She said, "There is always a deal coming. What happens the month the deal doesn't come?" He did not answer, because he had never, not once in the 2 years he had been running this deficit, genuinely imagined a month in which the deal didn't come. The deal had always come, and so the infrastructure of the debt had always, just barely, held together, and so the reckoning had always been next month's problem, and next month had always eventually become this month, and this month had always eventually produced a deal, and the cycle had continued, until it hadn't. That night, sitting alone in the penthouse after Darcy had gone back to her hotel, Blaine Quinn looked at the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows he was paying £10,000 a month to look at, and he did something he had not done in 2 years. He looked at his own life without the filter on. The plan Darcy drew up, because she drew up a plan, because that is what Darcy Quinn did when presented with a problem, was not comfortable. It was not designed to be comfortable. It was designed to be survivable, which was the more urgent requirement. The Range Rover went first, sold within the week, the finance agreement cleared with the proceeds, £500 left over. The Mercedes went second, larger finance agreement, tighter margin, but cleared and gone. The Porsche he was permitted to keep for the time being, not for sentimental reasons, but because its presence in his content was so established that removing it mid-season would have required explanations he was not yet ready to give. The penthouse. This was the conversation he had been dreading. Not because of the apartment itself. He was honest enough by this point to acknowledge that he had been renting a lifestyle rather than a home, but because of what leaving it meant, what it said publicly about the arc of his story. Darcy said, "You are not giving up. You are making a sustainable decision. Those are not the same thing, and I need you to understand the difference before we have this conversation." He gave notice. He found a flat in Stratford for £2,200 a month. 2 bedrooms. No roof terrace. No floor-to-ceiling windows. A perfectly decent, entirely ordinary flat that looked, to his 4 million followers, like nothing he had ever shown them before. The credit cards were consolidated into a single repayment plan structured over 30 months, The watch collection was partially liquidated, the pieces he actually owned outright, as opposed to the ones whose ownership was more complicated, through a luxury resale platform that gave him better returns than he expected. And then Darcy said the thing he had been afraid of from the beginning of this process. She said, "I want to be your financial manager, formally, on a retainer, full visibility of every account, every inbound payment, every outgoing above £50. He said, "That's not necessary." She said, "It is absolutely necessary. And the fact that you don't want me to do it is precisely the reason I need to." He agreed. He hated it for 3 months. He found it humiliating in a quiet, ongoing way that surprised him with its persistence. He was 29 years old, and he needed his sister to approve his expenditure. The man whose content 4 million people consumed as aspirational had to send his older sister a WhatsApp message before buying anything meaningful. And then, somewhere in the 4th month, the humiliation began to give way to something else. A clarity, a groundedness, the particular stability of a person who knows exactly what they have and exactly what they can do with it, and is not operating on the gap between the two. It was, he has said since, the most uncomfortable comfort he had ever experienced. The content problem was the one he had been most afraid of, not the finances. As bad as those were, they were a solvable problem with enough discipline and time. The content was something else. His entire professional existence was built on the perception of a lifestyle that he could no longer afford to maintain. If he said nothing, the inconsistency between the penthouse content and the Stratford flat reality would become visible, and the speculation would fill the gap with narratives worse than the truth. If he addressed it, he had to choose how. Darcy said, "Get ahead of it." His manager said, "Get ahead of it." His therapist, he had started seeing a therapist, which was also Darcy's idea, which had also turned out to be correct, said that transparency was the only option consistent with sustainable long-term practice. Blaine sat in front of his camera on a Sunday afternoon in the Stratford flat. No ring lighting, no professional setup, no branded background, just him, and the flat, and whatever was on his face when he talked. He posted it with the title, "I need to be honest with you." 22 minutes long, he told them the shape of it, not every number but the architecture, the gap between the lifestyle and the reality, the way the performance had consumed the person underneath it. The coffee shop moment. Darcy coming to London. The cars. The flat. The decision he had made, and the one his sister had made him make. The plan they were working through together. The video got 11 million views in the first 48 hours. He had prepared himself for the reaction. He had spent 2 days before posting cycling through every version of how it could go wrong. The mockery, the "I knew it," the fraud, the "delete your account," the comments that say you deserve this. He had visualized each one and decided he could survive it. What he had not prepared for was the relief. Thousands of comments from people who said they had been quietly fracturing themselves financially, trying to approximate what his account showed. Thousands more from people who had felt, watching his content, like failures for not living the way he appeared to live. A young woman who wrote that she had taken out a loan she could not afford because she had been convinced, by content like his, that the life he showed was achievable on her income if she just made the right choices. A comment that read, "I used to cry looking at your apartment. I thought I was doing everything wrong. Thank you for telling the truth." He screenshotted that comment. He kept it. the brand relationships shifted. Some brands, the ones whose value proposition was the fantasy, the aspiration uncoupled from reality, pulled back quietly, and he let them go. Others came in who wanted exactly what he had inadvertently become, a voice people trusted because he had, when it mattered, chosen truth over aesthetic. His audience did not shrink. It grew. People who had followed him for the lifestyle stayed, most of them. People who had never followed him because he felt unreachable began to find him for a different reason. His income dropped in the short term, his debt reduced month by month under Darcy's management. He drove a second-hand Volkswagen Golf that he paid for outright in cash and mentioned in a post that got 2 million views and more comments than almost anything he had ever posted. He is still on a repayment plan. He is still, some months, having the uncomfortable conversations about outgoing that Darcy requires him to have. He and Darcy have dinner every time she's in London. He pays. She always orders the steak. And for the first time in years, not the content version of his life, but the actual one, the 2-bedroom flat in Stratford and the second-hand Golf and the financial plan with 30 months left on it, Blaine Quinn actually likes what he sees when the camera is off. That is the story of Blaine Quinn, the influencer with 4 million followers, 1 million in earnings, and 1.5 million going out, until the day his sister came to London with an eye for numbers and absolutely no patience for avoidance. Drop a comment below. Did you ever feel pressured by social media to spend money you didn't have? Because this story hit something real, and I think the comments on this one are going to say a lot about all of us. Be honest down there. This is a safe space for the truth. And if you are not subscribed to Corporate Chaos Scandals, fix that right now. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, share it. We are here every single week and we are not done yet. I'll see you in the next one.